Most people think the way to become valuable at work is to do more. More tasks, more hours, more responsiveness. It sounds logical, and it's rewarded just enough early on to keep people stuck there. But that approach quietly caps your value. The people who break through aren't the ones who work harder. They're the ones who change how they interpret their job. They stop asking what they need to do today and start asking what outcome they're responsible for protecting. That shift doesn't make work harder, it makes it calmer. And it's usually invisible from the outside until review time, when one person has a list of completed tasks and another can clearly explain what changed because they were there. This section is about that internal shift. Not what your manager should do, not how the company should change, but how you operate once expectations exist and clarity is available. It's the employee's view from the inside where most of the real leverage is either created or lost. Because long before promotions, bonuses, or recognition show up, something else happens first. Your manager decides how much they need to think about you, whether they trust you to move things forward without being pushed, whether your work creates confidence or creates follow-up. Most people never realize that's the game they're actually playing. So this section isn't about doing more things. It's about thinking differently while doing the same work. It's about shifting from task completion to outcome ownership, from activity to progress, from motion to judgment. It's about how people intentionally become easier to manage, easier to trust, and harder to replace without asking for permission and without waiting for authority. You'll hear this part of the story from the employee's perspective first. What it feels like to realize you've been measuring the wrong things. How reflection, documentation, and small adjustments stop feeling like extra work and start feeling like an advantage. How the mindset changes from, am I doing enough, to, am I moving the right thing forward? And why that shift changes how reviews go, how coaching feels, and how rewards show up. Then, in the next section, we'll flip the lens. Same system, same behaviors, but this time from the manager's perspective. What it's like to lead people who operate this way. Why so many managers think they're asking for initiative when they've never made space for it. And how clarity, coaching, and accountability start working together instead of against each other. This isn't theory, it's not motivation, and it's not about playing politics. It's about aligning how work is done with how value is actually judged. When that alignment clicks, stress drops, trust builds, and progress becomes visible. That's the difference between staying busy and becoming impossible to replace.
I always thought I was doing what I was supposed to do. I showed up, I stayed busy, I knocked out what landed in front of me. If something was assigned, I handled it. If someone asked for help, I jumped in. And honestly, I thought that's what being dependable meant. But over time, it started to feel like no matter how much I did, it never quite stacked up. Reviews felt vague, praise felt random. I'd hear things like, you're solid or you're reliable, but nothing really changed. More responsibility didn't show up. More freedom didn't show up. And I couldn't figure out what I was missing because I was already doing everything I could.
That's the trap. When your job is defined as tasks, you can complete everything and still not move anything forward. Effort without orientation feels productive in the moment, but it doesn't build leverage. What changes things is realizing that tasks are just inputs. Outcomes are the real responsibility. And once someone sees that, their behavior shifts without them trying to impress anyone.
As his manager, I could tell Miles cared. That was never the question. But I still found myself checking in, asking for updates, filling in gaps I thought shouldn't be there. I wanted more initiative, more ownership, more thinking ahead. And if I'm honest, I kept assuming he could see the same priorities I had in my head. I didn't realize how much I was evaluating him on things I'd never actually made explicit. I wanted him to act like an owner, but I hadn't given him a clear picture of what ownership looked like in practice.
Here's the part most people miss. Ownership doesn't start with authority. It starts with orientation. When someone understands the objective they're feeding, they naturally stop operating like a task runner. They start making decisions that reduce friction toward a shared objective instead of showing how much work they're doing.
The shift for me wasn't dramatic, it was subtle. I stopped measuring my day by what I completed and started asking whether what I worked on actually moved the objective forward. That changed how I approached everything. I started preparing a little more before jumping in. I thought about how my work would land for the next person. I wrote things down, not to report, but to think. And weirdly, it didn't feel like more work. It felt like less wasted effort. I wasn't spinning anymore. I wasn't guessing. I was aiming. I was accomplishing a clear objective.
This is where reflection enters, not as admin, but as leverage. When people pause to capture what worked, what didn't, and what they'd adjust next time, they aren't slowing down, they're sharpening. Experience alone doesn't make you better. Experience plus reflection does.
What I started noticing about Miles was that I stopped needing to chase him. He came into conversations already thinking about improvements. He wasn't defensive. He wasn't explaining effort. He was talking about outcomes, trade-offs, and what he'd do differently next time. That changed how I coached him. The conversation shifted from correction to refinement, and trust grew faster than I expected.
People who operate this way don't need to be pushed. They don't wait for motivation. They don't confuse motion with progress. They understand that their real job isn't doing the thing. It's reaching the objective, learning from the attempt, and passing forward work that makes the system stronger.
What surprised me most was review time. It wasn't tense. I didn't need to sell myself. The work spoke, the improvements were visible, the outcomes were clear, and the rewards weren't awkward or mysterious. More trust, more freedom, more opportunity, not because I asked for it, but because it made sense.
This is how people become impossible to replace. Not by doing everything, not by trying to look good, but by orienting their work around outcomes, reflecting honestly, and reducing friction for everyone around them. When you stop focusing on tasks and start operating this way, work becomes more meaningful. Managers respect and step back. Trust builds, and leverage follows. That's not hustle, that's alignment. And once you feel it, you don't go back. In the next episode, we'll stay on the employee side and look at why reflection isn't extra work at all, but the shortcut most people skip, and how learning faster than the people around you changes everything. See you there.